Okay, hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to today's event on automating sales tax compliance in Dynamics ERP. I'm Jason Gumpert from MS Dynamics World, and I'm joined by Matt Patrick. He is a tax automation expert and regional sales manager at Avalara. So as we get started, please know that you can add your questions at any time throughout today's event using the Q&A block you should see to the right of the main presentation window. Matt will be making time for those questions at the end. So without further delay, I am happy to welcome Matt Patrick to get things started.
Yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today about our favorite subject, Avalara, bills and use tax compliance, right? And so the main thing that I wanted to give everyone some context for our call today is our primary focus is really around the business challenge overall. Why do companies seek out Avalara to really automate this process? What does it look like? What are some of the moving parts related to compliance? And what's the profile of a customer that might seek out a product like ours in the sales and use tax space? I want to spend time specifically in the Microsoft applications. I'm going to walk through a little bit of Dynamics GP and how our products fit into Dynamics GP, but keep in mind, we're a product that integrates with GP, NAV, AX, SL, a variety of other, Microsoft ecosystem type products like SalesPad or CRM or several others. So what's fundamentally the same is really the way they operate, as you'll see, is the same from GP to really his other financial applications. So we kind of touch upon those points, and hope to answer any questions that you have out there at the end of today's call. So let's go ahead and get started. What is kind of the profile of a customer that oftentimes seeks out Avalara? I would say most of the time it's oftentimes those that are looking to scale the business, and they're just looking to do it in smarter and more scalable ways, which are they're finding that it's more challenging to go from operating in a couple states to 20 to 30 states and just continue to hire folks to really solve the challenge, right? And when you look at sales and use tax in particular, what's challenging about it is there's so many different moving parts to compliance. So finding someone that really understands all of those pieces becomes more and more challenging, more and more expensive to really maintain. But the core function that they really want is they want visibility or control across the enterprise, meaning they don't want users to make tax decisions. I mean, that's the main purpose of a solution like ours, is really to take tax decisions out of the hands of users at the front end of the process, whether it's picking a tax schedule, picking a taxability rule at a line level, looking at exemptions based on different ship-tos at the customer level. All of those dynamics or combinations are possible areas of risk or exposure that it just doesn't make sense to really partake in as an expanding business. So I would say fundamentally that's generally what we see for a lot of customers that come out to look at our products. To give you some level of context about Avalara, I mean, we're still a pretty young company. We're probably a little over 13, 14 years old, and we have well north of 20,000 customers renewing at 98%. So it's all about finding the right customers with the right problems to solve. And once we do, most customers really don't look back at, do they want to go back to manual with this kind of process? And I think you'll see why. We're going to talk about some of the manual parts of tax compliance. The tax compliance at the highest level, a lot of businesses, hey, it's a statutory requirement. We're compelled to do it. It's not really adding revenue. Let's face it, I mean, you're not getting a pat on the back when everything's right, but in the event of an audit, if something were to go wrong, it doesn't go well. So, the challenge with it is it's ever moving, ever changing, and there's opportunities to take that part of the business process and really automate it, very similar to payroll tax back in the day or even today. One of the first components that we see customers really working with inside Dynamics or other financial systems is, and it's most common as you think of, well, what tax rate do I need to assign to a customer if they're taxable, right? And you think of zip codes. Zip codes are something we all know, but zip codes were really drawn by the boundaries of delivering mail, right? Not necessarily, tax boundaries. So in the tax boundary space, what you're finding is, in states like Michigan or Ohio or some others, Pennsylvania, zip codes work more than fine. But if you get out into other states like Colorado, California, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, other parts of the country, you start to ask yourself, what in the world were these politicians thinking when they've created the drafting the boundaries around what their tax rates are. So, a good example of that is in the Denver market. It's probably one of the more pronounced. You can be driving, I don't know, 3 miles, 4 miles down the street and be in 4 or 5 different taxing jurisdictions that really can range from anywhere to almost 8% on one end to 4% on the other end. So as you can imagine, it can be a bit bizarre selling in the area of Colorado in terms of getting the right tax result accurately and consistently when you're dealing with these tax boundaries. And just that, I had a guy probably last year or so. He asked me, why in the world are the tax boundaries drawn the way they are in some of these states? I mean, I just don't get it. It literally does come to politics, right? So it's kind of that concept of gerrymandering, where politicians come together with business to find commercial purposes for redrafting certain districts for business purposes, for local community purposes, and then of course funding purposes come from a tax perspective, right? So you'll see special jurisdictional taxes related to football or transit and or other purposes is the reason why we're seeing some of these odd-shaped boundaries on our tax map. When you look at zip codes overall, I mean, there's well north of 12,000, depending on how you want to count it. There could be more than 12,000 to really manage on a year-in, year-out basis. And on top of that, you have tax holidays. We're getting to that point today where we're getting back to school, right? I don't care what community you're in, you're probably seeing the back to school sales. In some states that they're going to have a tax exempt week or day. Other industries have tax holidays as well. So some customers are having to really manage a variety of different other applications, even outside of just really zip codes. A good topic of that is really product and service taxability. So, some of us on the phone may have pretty standard needs when it comes to product and service taxability. Meaning you might be in 2 states, you sell a widget, it's a widget is a widget. It's always tangible property unless the customer is exempt. This is not a big area for you. In other industries, like in my industry, software, web-based software can be taxed fully in the state of Washington. It could be taxed at a reduced rate in the state of Texas at maybe 80% of the base rate. It could be tax exempt in the state of Virginia. And then we can go back to Colorado, and the customer, if they're in Denver, it can be tax exempt at the state level, but taxable at the local level. So there's a myriad of rules out there related to how products and services can be taxed. And if you're a customer that's really going into a scenario where you have expanded nexus, for example, I had a gentleman just recently who really had taken over for what was a bookkeeper, and he's of course more of a traditional controller coming into this smaller company, but not real small company. And he found out right away that she wasn't registered everywhere that they should. So they have to register in 20 some odd states. And you can imagine the amount of tax research across 5 to 6 different categories that you would have to do, in addition to just doing all the paperwork and the tax disclosure analysis as part of the overall project. You're really looking for tools and methods and solutions to help really scale that to the level that you want. And the taxability is continually to be, more and more of a challenge. One that we can all relate to that you probably don't pay much attention to. I honestly knew, prior to coming to Avalara, I probably never really paid attention to it. But just going into a gas station, sometimes if you buy an original Milky Way versus a midnight dark Milky Way, one could be taxable and one's non-taxable. And again, why? It makes no sense. I mean, how does it really work? It's generally speaking, it has to do with the one ingredient, flour. In some states, they treat something with flour as either food or if without flour, it's considered candy or taxable. So again, in certain industries, when it comes to taxability, it can get down into the ingredient level as to how states really treat that particular product. Sourcing rules. So this is really, think about this in terms of, what jurisdiction assignment do we, meaning what jurisdictional rate do we apply to a particular transaction, right? And, For many of us on the phone, we think of this 9 times out of 10 as destination-based. Where are we shipping to? And that's generally true in a lot of cases, but in some states it is origin-based. And then if you have the fortunate opportunity to work in California or Texas, you have scenarios where you run into kind of a mixed sourcing environment, meaning some of the counties are origin-based, and some of the cities and special jurisdictional taxes are destination-based, where services can always be destination-based. And then in Texas, it's kind of a little bit backwards. Cities and counties are origin-based, special jurisdictional taxes are destination-based, and some services are destination-based. So as you can imagine, just sourcing a transaction at times, and if you're expanding in a lot of different states, there's a lot to pick up on and a lot to configure properly in your financials, whether, again, it's GP or AX. This is a study done by Wakefield Research. It's just really indicating, different types of companies that are selling online and what's their awareness around Nexus, right? And it's kind of funny. It brings to mind a quote I've seen recently, kind of floating around there. I don't know if I saw it on LinkedIn or some other website, but the quote was, if you thought hiring a professional was expensive, try hiring an amateur. And when it comes to sales tax, it really is true. It's even challenging as a professional. I mean, I know in doing this for 4.5 years, I'll be on a call tomorrow where I'll hear something for the first time. I mean, that's just the nature of tax, whether it's income tax or sales tax. You're going to run into some things that are just unique for that particular customer. And it's very much the same for even the folks out there in industry. In this terms of this, they're talking about, they're not sure or confident in some of the Nexus requirements that they have. And I know personally speaking, in a lot of the conversations I had here at Avalara over time, Nexus is probably one of the predominant areas you want to spend time and certainly review consistently to see what business activities you're currently doing today that may affect your footprint or responsibility to register, collect in additional states. The cost of compliance, this can really range. This is, again, another research study done by the Aberdeen Research Group. It's really focusing on the small to mid-sized marketplace, and it's asking, fellow professionals, where are you spending your time as it relates to this part of compliance? And as you can see, it can range anything from the use tax or the purchasing side to some of the research done on taxability or just preparing returns, right? So what they're finding is, obviously, the nature of your industry or business, certainly you would have different percentages of time in certain buckets or another, but they're seeing pretty consistently a lot of companies are spending a great deal of time just across multiple personnel managing this process year to year. And of course, Aberdeen's basically taking that and converting it to hard dollar cost in terms of, what's a fully loaded employee professional doing this work today in industry, and then really applying that in the different parts or segments of the process. So a day in the life of a compliance manager, there's a few things going on, right? So they're reviewing reports, they're making sure tax rates are updated, they're doing taxability research, they're analyzing future business opportunities where that might impact tax exposure. There's just a variety of different things that can go on day to day. And they need help, right? And that's where Avalara comes in. I mean, that's why our founders of our company really built a solution years ago, was to really tackle this problem in an efficient way for the small to mid-market and, of course, more and more the enterprise market. The solutions that we use at Avalara to really tackle this problem from the beginning of the process in terms of tax determination to later in the process when we go to file and remit returns are really these three core modules. And today, from a presentation perspective, we're mostly going to be focusing on the left-hand side in terms of tax determination in the order-to-cash process. But for GP and NAV and other solutions, we have a use tax where we can provide a real-time calculation for consumer use tax on the purchasing side. In the middle, though, is exemption certificates, right? So in a lot of the customers I work with in the Microsoft space, it's very common to work in industry that they're collecting and maintaining a great deal of combination of exemption certificates. And managing that properly is critically important from an audit perspective, as you can imagine. Many times before we get involved customers are coming to us through their CPA firm because they're getting ready for an audit, and the CPA firm's used or seen our product at other clients, and they're saying, well, we need to get ready. We need to have a better process, a repeatable process going forward to help mitigate that auditor from putting us on the list in terms of coming back every 3 to 4 years. And then, of course, tax returns. So we'll cover tax returns as well. But how does Avalara, or how does the tax solution work? We're a web-based cloud software. So what does that tangibly mean? We do not store tax rates, taxability rules, specific formatting of reports, jurisdictional boundaries. We don't store any of that information within your financials. All of that is maintained by tax professionals here at Avalara. And the beauty of it is that the more moving parts you would have local to your financials, is the more there's an opportunity for it to do what? Break. It's just the general nature of that compliance. So the more moving parts to compliance that you're managing local, the more opportunities there are for things to just break down. So what Avalara did is they created integrations to send the data we need to make a tax determination and bring that result back into your quote ordering and invoicing process. And then, of course, take that data, present it to you in a format for us to file tax returns on your behalf very simply and efficiently. Let's take a look a little bit about, how does Avalara really fit into the process within a financial like GP? And again, when we look at Dynamics GP, it's very similar, or the way it works in Dynamics GP, it works very similar for AXNAV, SL, and other products. So when you think of tax compliance, where do you start, or how often is, I would say, what's the first step in the process? The first step in the process for many of us is setting up a new customer or looking at an existing customer. And one of the first things that you have to do is think about, well, do I have a need to put a tax schedule, right? Either here or in the different ship-tos, where do we have a presence, and do I have to assign a particular tax rate to that particular customer? With AvaTax, what we're going to tell you to do is to stop asking users to make tax decisions or think about which schedule to apply. We're just going to ask you to put AvaTax as the tax schedule. Again, the idea in mind is that in the cloud, you have your nexus settings, you have your entity profile in terms of are you a single or multiple reporting entity. You have all of your reporting requirements. Everything's really in the cloud. By triggering that function there, that's what's telling GP to suppress its native functionality and for it to look at AvaTax to make a tax determination for the customer. When you go to set something up like this, you can do this in batch. You don't have to go customer by customer and click on all this. We have utilities, you can just do it in batch. But the simple process is really telling GP or other financials to look in the cloud to make tax determinations. Another component of our solution for anyone that may be using address validation today with other software, or maybe looking or considering, is it useful for you? Our software does have standard address validation built into it, so you can update the address with the CAS certified database address directly on screen in each of the address fields within Dynamics GP or other products. Exemption certificates. So within the customer card area, you have the opportunity with our Cert Capture product to send an electronic request to the customer via email. When your customer receives that request, they'll see a link in the email. They can click the link. It'll send them to a certificate wizard. They can fill it out on screen, sign it with their mouse, and you just captured an electronic certificate with the data set behind it. So it's pretty powerful in the way that it really can kind of combine the elements of both taxable scenarios and exempt scenarios. A question that comes up quite a bit is, or a challenge that some customers have is, let's say Aaron Fitz here, Bob has one location, and he has 3 certificates on file, and we'll say that's Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And you also have Nexus in, we'll say, Florida. Well, so does he, and when you ship to Florida, you should be taxing this company because you don't have an exemption on file for Florida. It doesn't matter what financials you're running. There's not really a great way to automate that unless you're using products like Avalara to really set it up and configure so it's automatically being processed as a taxable decision in Florida versus an exempt decision in the 3 other states you'd normally operate or do business in. In terms of order entry, from a user's perspective, everything really stays the same. It's just, things go on behind the scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate here. And you'll see a little thing go across the window, and what that's doing is it's reaching out to Avalara to make the tax decision and updating tax just that quickly. So again, what did it do behind the scenes? It's looking at origin, destination, warehouse information of where products are being shipped to and from, looking at the product itself. Oftentimes, customers group products by categories so that we can assign tax content to multiple items at once. We can apply that tax decision to that particular item or service that you're selling or servicing the customer with, and then drive that result back in just that quickly, whether it's individually or in batch. Let's go ahead and look at the tax console itself, AvaTax. So where would you go to set up your tax compliance profile, right? This is where you go, as I was describing earlier. As a company, I want to be able to really look at, I just want to be able to set up what our next settings are. If we're entering a new state, I want to be able to drive it from one place, and then my users don't have to think about, oh, now I have to pick a tax schedule for Arizona, where I haven't had to do that for the 5 years I've been here. So when you first log into AvaTax, you get presented with a dashboard of information, but in terms of setting it up briefly, it's as simple as setting up your entity structure, setting up your nexus settings, looking at the tax content to apply it within Dynamics GP or other products, and then you really start setting up to get ready for testing. You can start testing transactions pretty quickly. Once it's passing transactions over, you have, of course, your standard reports. We'll kind of run a summary report to give you a flavor or feel for some of just the standard reporting here within the system. So what I'm running right now is a sales tax summary report. So it's going to break it out by state, total sales, total sellers use, total combined sales across each state. And what's nice about the reporting functionality here in the system is you can continue to drill down into these specific numbers to get to the results that you're looking for. So if you're looking in Colorado for whatever reason and you wanted to see or had questions about every invoice that hit this particular county, within 2 mouse clicks you can get to every invoice at that dated time period that really touched that county. Document code is going to really reflect your invoice number from whatever financials you're using. And of course, the line items, the tax content, the total amounts. Each of our reports can be dropped into various formats, including our best friend Excel. And as you can imagine, can be quite helpful to really scope the data from an audit perspective. You can get out just the data you need to provide an auditor pretty quickly on that side. Most folks that are using us, though, certainly use our compliance solution. So from a tax return perspective, we file, gosh, I'm trying to think how many returns it is now. It's definitely 10 billion or more in terms of the total dollar amounts of returns that we file. And the reason for that is, the leverage, right? So if we already have the data, why not put it into a format that's easy to review and approve for us to file on your behalf? Tax returns is oftentimes, if a customer is not doing it right away, what happens is if someone that was doing it leaves, the person that is picking it up didn't realize all the nuances related to just filing tax returns. Like there's a little bit more than just dropping a number on a return. There's each state has its own little differences. Whether it's California and it's Schedule B or Schedule A, or Michigan or Ohio, on how each one of these tax returns can be different, and the logins and the payments, etc. So what this portal does, or what this worksheet does, is it provides and builds all of your tax liability or tax returns in one place. It's your tax filing calendar, okay? It's your place to go where it's your workflow tool to really approve tax returns. Let me go ahead and go into looking at California in particular. It's going to have your quarterly return. We're going to make the quarterly accrual. But what's nice is from a top-down level, your users aren't having to think about the various different nuances related to the California return and where do the numbers go, compared to again, another return where it's just completely different for that particular state. So they can really just go top down. The way this system really works is we would take one amount out of your account, this 18,198, whether it's an ACH debit or an ACH credit, and then we would go into each form, fill out the tax return, whether use your existing e-file logins, and then, or if it's a paper return, we'll unfortunately have to do the paper return. And then we'll, of course, remit payment on your behalf. Once we do so, all that information gets posted back in the same dashboard in terms of the filing archive. So you'll see PDFs of the tax returns and an Excel spreadsheet of all the payments that we made on your behalf. Tax notices, we'll help work with you on tax notices. So it's, and being here for a while, we've run into scenarios before where someone's come into a situation and the person before just kind of buried their head in the sand when it came to tax notices and kept throwing them in the drawer and filing them away, and I'll get back to them and get back to them. So, tax notices are important to address and apply, and so we certainly work with our customers to help them, move past and accomplish or complete the tax notices that apply to their compliance. So each of this process, by the way, this is, as you can imagine, tax compliance or filing of returns is date sensitive. So, a question that oftentimes comes up is, at what point in the month does Avalara need to lock down this worksheet so that we file on your behalf? Generally speaking, that's around the 10th of the month. So we need you to do your reconciliation within your financials to our tax reporting for you to lock down this worksheet so that we have the time to file tax returns on your behalf and timely, because if we don't, we're responsible for the penalties and interest related to the compliance work. So overall, that's a really high-level just overview of AvaTax and how it works within Dynamics GP. Again, from a perspective of NAV, AX, SL, or other products, the same fundamentals apply in terms of you're no longer managing tax schedules. It's moving to AvaTax. That's the trigger that's really telling the financial system to look at our system for tax. And then it's just tax mapping when all your tax reporting is really done in AvaTax. So again, the idea to summarize is, compliance can be achieved by just really automating it and focusing really your time on other growth or efficiencies parts of your business. And again, this continues to be a process that you'll see a lot of customers continue to outsource, just like it was, previously back in the 80s with ADP and payroll tax. More and more you'll see companies automate the sales tax side of it due to the changing laws in Nexus and other tax requirements. So again, our commitment to our customers is continuing to be the fastest, easiest, most accurate, simple solution for you to use every day to make your life easier as it relates to indirect tax. So with that, I will absolutely open it up for questions. Jason, I don't know if you may be able to just kind of chat about which ones are out there, and we'll kind of cover them one by one.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Matt. And for anyone in the audience who would like to invite you to ask your questions now, again, use the Q&A box that you should see to the right of the main presentation window, and we can take those now. So a couple have come in already. First question is, what modules does AvaTax work with in SL? For example, project, field service, order management?
Yeah, good question. So two ways to talk about this too. So we work with versions 2011 and 2015. We integrate with AR, project, and flexible billing. So AR, project management, and flexible billing.
All right.
And it's really this web-based solution for SL, for anyone out there, previously, if it's predominantly just a rate table solution you were using in the past or just managing rates. The web-based solution that we added probably at the fall of last year was its first opportunity to use, a solution more commonly used in some other industries where it's the web-based connection and the other functions or tools available in that environment.
So someone else asks, I'm curious as to what happens on the ERP side with regard to the tax details. What GL codes do they hit if the tax schedules within GP are not used?
Sure. So I think the question is probably getting at reconciliation. And so there's two schools of thought with reconciliation. One is if you want to have AvaTax related to, AvaTax Ohio, you can have it structured so it's set up on a per state basis, and then the per state AvaTax schedule can be assigned to a GL account, so that when you run an Avalara account or an Avalara report, you can still tie it back from a GL perspective, probably what you're most commonly used to. What most of our customers do, believe it or not, is they just use the one account because they're finding that there's less and less errors or issues with reconciliation. And, just tying it out from one account and using Avalara as a subledger to one account is working fine for many of them. But you can absolutely do it the other way if you'd like.
All right. I'm wondering if this integrates with QuickBooks Enterprise version 16.
It absolutely integrates with QuickBooks Enterprise. I'm assuming if version 16 is a relatively new one. I'm not a QuickBooks expert, so I don't know all the versioning numbers. But I'd find it pretty surprising if we wouldn't integrate with it, unless it's a really old version that has been out of support for several years.
All right. A couple more questions here, so I do want to make a last call as we get down to the last couple here. I also want to remind folks we do have a survey that will pop up after the event. We really appreciate any feedback. You can just take, if you can take 15 or 20 seconds there after the event, please do look out for that. Excuse me. So someone else asks, we're considering selling through Amazon. Are you familiar with the Nexus rules?
Well, candidly, we can't give tax advice, but I would say, customers that are, I believe it's called the FBA approach, where if you maintain ownership of your products in Amazon warehouses, it's known to create Nexus in, I want to say, 13 to 15 states. If you send over your contact information after our call, I have some documentation I could pass along to you that kind of spells out what the regulations are for each of those states to keep an eye on and be aware of. So signing up with Amazon could make a company go from single state Nexus to reporting in 13 to 15 states pretty quickly if you go that route.
All right. Someone asks, is there a chunk file or code that is installed at the GP workstation or server level? We have hooks into our e-commerce and CRM that use Vertex service. Does Avalara have a similar tool available?
So our integration to Dynamics GP, for example, is it's a wizard-based installation and installs probably literally in 15 minutes, and configuration for the initial install and probably an hour. So it's a really straightforward process. It's a certified for Microsoft integration, and we have certified for Microsoft integrations really across the board. But yeah, I'm not familiar enough with Vertex. They have different versions of their product from like an enterprise level to an SMB level on how they integrate with Microsoft products. Some are different than others, I believe. So it may be similar, but that's how ours works. It's an install shield, and it's wizard-based. You can install it very quickly.
Okay, another question. We have an SL client on rate-based Avalara. They're struggling on getting rates updated. Do you have a written integration they could use, or do they need a custom integration?
So the previous challenge with the rate tables in SL is that, I was talking about rate tables aren't accurate all the time, and then sometimes when you're updating the rates, there's no historical aspect to reversing previous transactions. That movement of data becomes more and more of a challenge. So we did build a web-based integration to SL last year. We'd have to look at what modules the customer is using to determine tax, and that'll tell us, do we have the modules that they need to integrate for tax purposes and use the web-based version. In that way, that they would get away from completely using the rate tables. In our web-based product, it takes an address and it converts it to a GPS coordinate dynamically to improve the calculation or the accuracy of the calculation. So they may run into just better tax results as well.
Okay, well, we appear to be at the end of our question queue, so we'll start wrapping up. We have recorded today's event. We'll be making that available to all of you in the next few days here. You'll get an email alert on that. Yeah, so Matt, thanks so much for taking the time to present today, for taking so many questions, too.
Likewise, we always appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, everyone.
All right, and with that, we will conclude today's event. Have a great day, everyone.